So, as I mentioned previously, okay, you do need at least two pictures. I'm looking around the room. Most people I've talked to, you've got at least two. Perfect. What I would start out by doing is opening the picture that you want to work with. So, I had started to build this one earlier today. You can tell it's not finished at all. But what I would recommend again is start with whatever picture you plan to use kind of as your background. Now, I know there's a couple of you just looking around the room already that yours might require a different background later on. If you can avoid that, try to. What I started out with was a picture of like this cat. It didn't have the spots on it, but I'm not going to turn off all the layers. But I started out with this cat. Okay, now who could tell me what would be the easiest way for me to cut this cat out? What tool? Yeah, use object selection if you can. And I did. I used the object selection. If I were to go in, that's the fourth tool down. It's underneath the magic wand. I can draw on top of it, or I can just kind of click it. And of course, a lot of your animals have very tiny details like fur, whiskers, all kinds of just like tiny little things that stick off of their body, even if it's not fur. They might have like prickly, whatever needles, whatever that's officially called, a porcupine. I'm learning I don't know enough about animals when I'm talking during this project. But if you select it, remember, you can always go up here to select and mask. The trick with running ants is, okay, if you want to do anything to move or adjust your running ants, you have to be on a tool that makes them. It is very picky. So to get select and mask, I have to be on a tool that makes them. If I'm back on the arrow tool, select and mask won't show up. But as long as I'm on any tool that makes the running ants, I can use the select and mask. I do recommend around the edges of hair and just like any little fine details, use that refine edge brush tool. Okay, it's not always perfect, but see how immediately it starts to get the edges of my cat's fur a lot better than just the object selection by itself. It's not perfect. Okay, and if you look too close, it won't look amazing, but it will always look better than just leaving it as is at first. So use that. Okay, now remember, when we hit OK after the selected mask, it doesn't immediately make a mask for you. Okay, what tool makes a mask? What button down on the bottom of your layers panel? Yeah, this little Japanese flag. Okay, if you are ever in doubt while I'm not here, if you hover over these little symbols, I hate that it pops up with tutorials sometimes, but if you hover over the little symbols, it will tell you what each one stands for. And the one that looks like a Japanese flag says layer masks. Okay, so if I select it, I can turn on my layer mask really easy. Okay, and remember, on your layer masks, because they're black and white, you can always use the black and white paint. So I can just grab the paintbrush. Okay, I can paint over my cat just like so. And then if I want to, I can swap to white and I can paint it all. That might help if I actually swapped it. Sorry. I can paint it all back in. Okay, so remember, there are multiple ways for you to do anything, multiple ways for you to clean stuff up. Now, let's talk about a couple other tools that might make it a little bit easier. Okay, I intentionally picked two animals that have very different texture types because it's going to be hard to mix them together. So let me turn on a few different parts of my like lionfish here. And I did have a bunch of different lionfish that I could use. Okay, so check this out. This is not cut out well. This is just for the example. But a lionfish does have stripes. And I did pick a lionfish that's kind of orangish in color to help me out, like the cat. But say that you have a picture of an animal and it's not the right color. Sometimes some techniques will work really well for a photo and sometimes they won't. It depends on what the texture is, what the quality of the photo is. So let me go over a few ways that you can change the colors. Okay. The first way is definitely the easiest way, but it's also the way that doesn't work as often. Okay. So it's less likely to work for most people. But if I'm selected on my picture, I'm going to just edit this lionfish right here that I've partially cut out. I can go up to image and I can hit adjustments and I can choose, might help if I'm clicked on the right layer again. Sorry. I can hit adjustments and I can choose hue and saturation. So hue means color, if that helps you remember what it is. Hue / saturation, that's just the brightness of colors. And I can come in and I can slide this little hue bar. Oh, am I clicked on the cat? Y'all, I'm doing a terrible job. Let me try that again. Okay, let's try this one more time. All right, so now when I slide the hue slider, okay, I can change the lionfish. All right, and I can make it a different color. Now that's great if your animal, needs a brighter color. But a lot of animals out in nature are neutral tones, like tans and browns, and maybe even like grays and blacks and things like that. And controlling those with saturation and hue is not as easy. Sometimes you can make it look a little bit more brown, or a little bit more tan, like by adding a little bit more yellow to it. But if that's the case, if you need to make yours look a little bit more brown, let's try a couple different things, okay? You can always cheat the system and just make a layer that has a color on it. And sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. So I've cut out part of this lionfish, right? I can come over to my layers panel and I can click on, if I hold control down and I click on that lionfish mask, the black and white rectangle, this is just like when we did the cheetah print on top of the Pegasus the other day. It'll select that for me. It selected that shape of that mask. Okay. And if I need to just paint that part a different color, if I select it, I can make a brand new layer. And I can actually come over here. Maybe I'll pick out a brown, maybe just to like show you, because a lot of you have animals that are lions, deer, sloth, reptiles, monkeys, wolves. They're all like brownish colors. So I can pick out a brownish color. If I have a brown color in my picture, I could also eyedropper like that actual animal. But then I can just paint bucket it in. And at first, yeah, it looks awful, looks real bad. But I can come over and try out different blending modes. And sometimes, not every time, but sometimes the blending modes work really well. It kind of depends on the picture, the lighting, and the texture of whatever your animal is. So if it doesn't work super well, there's still other things we can do. Don't worry. Because like even if I turn down the opacity, that still doesn't look quite right for mine. So here's the option that takes a little longer, but I think it works the best. Okay. And we did this a couple of times. If you guys think back to that cheesy movie poster we did, that's the first time we did this next thing. You don't have to make it look like that to change the colors, though. Sometimes the easiest step is to actually make your photo black and white. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down to the bottom of my layers panel. I'm going to hit this little circle that's gray and white, and I could choose black and white from the list. And remember, when you first click black and white, oh yeah, I missed an important step. I'll fix that in a second. But when you first click black and white, there are colored sliders that pop up here on the properties. And you can adjust the overall lighting, even though it's black and white, by adjusting those sliders. Now, the reason I just dyed my entire picture black and white is because if you look over here at the layers panel, that little mask on the black and white layer is just one big solid white rectangle. So if I only wanted to affect this lionfish, I need to select that lionfish mask again. So let me do that one more time. I'm going to hold control down. I'm going to select that lionfish mask. Now, I had you do this a bunch of times with the Pegasus, and it got really confusing, and I am sorry. But I'm going to repeat it just so that you know. So I've selected the lionfish. Here's the problem, okay, with selecting the lionfish. I do want the lionfish to be black and white. I want everything else to go back to being in color mode. So what I need to do is I need to reverse where my running ants are. I need them to be around everything but the lionfish. Now, if I want to do anything to my running ants at all, I have to be on a tool that makes running ants. It's really stupid, but if you go to any tool that makes running ants, I can now right click on it and I can hit select inverse, which just means select the opposite. And if you look, the edges of your rectangle should have those little running ants. And now if I come over to my mask, I can grab black paints and I can grab the paint buckets and I could just paint that in and everything came back in color. And I know that was a lot of steps. But so I've made the lionfish black and white. And again, if I click on the symbol on the black and white layer, I can adjust the lighting in it. And now what I'll do is I'll add one more layer on top. And this time I'm going to be smart. I'm going to hold control down and I'm going to select that mask that is the lionfish before I make the next layer so that it has running ants. And I'm going to come down here to this circle and I can choose something called color balance. balance. Okay, color balance. And color balance also has a bunch of little sliders over here. And it takes a lot of messing with them. But usually a brown, if you type in like 30, 30, and then about 15, okay, you start to get kind of in the more neutral tones. And then you can adjust them a little bit more from there. Let me try a little more red and a little more kind of yellow. But I can start to play with tones that look a little bit more brown. But remember, by doing it this way, whatever the texture is in my original picture is still going to show up. So I can see the stripes from the lionfish. I can see that design still, but now I'm starting to like make a color that looks more brown. And if I needed orange, because my cat is actually orange, I can slide it and I can make it more of an orange color. Okay, so you can adjust it that way. Now, does that take longer? Sure. But it's probably the method that for most people will look the best. Okay, cool. All right. Now, let me mention another thing to you that will be helpful to a lot of people. All right, I do have stripes on my lionfish, and my cat has some stripes on it, but they do not match. They don't look the same at all. So, what I would recommend is let's try out the clone stamp tool. It's been a minute since we've used that tool. What I would do is if you're going to use the clone stamp tool, and this is just a general rule in general, okay? Before you edit any of your photos, save a backup copy. Make sure you got a backup layer somewhere, just like down at the bottom with the eye turned off in case you need it. Okay, that way you don't have to bring it back into the picture and resize it. It's just already there. But if I want to make some of these lionfish stripes kind of look like they're on my cat's fur, I can make a brand new layer. Okay. Actually, I'll do one better than that. The stripes are going to look kind of, well, it'll be fine. Okay. I'm going to make a brand new layer though. And the clone stamp is over here on your toolbar. It's below the paintbrush. It looks like a stamper tool. And the quick command for it is actually S, as in stamp. But the way that the clone stamp works, and you do want to check up here on your options bar, okay, there is a little option over here that says sample. And what that means is you're telling it what it can copy. By default, it's probably set to all layers. That means it can copy anything it sees. But you can set it to just be the layer you're currently on or the layer you're currently on and the one below it, just FYI. But what you need to do is in order to use the clone stamp tool, you have to copy something first. To copy, you have to hold down Alt by the spacebar. And so I can click over here in these stripes and I can make my paintbrush bigger even. And when I start to paint, it's going to start to copy what's right there. Now, as you paint, it's a little hard to see. Let me see if I can move it somewhere where you can see it better. I'm going to move it up here to the water. As I paint, you still can't really see it very well. There's a little plus sign though. It's moving around kind of in the middle of the striped area of my picture. It's right about here as I paint. Okay, and now it's on the ear. Okay, you'll see that little plus sign move. That plus sign is an indicator of what it's starting to copy from. I don't want the cat's ear to be copied. I just want the stripes. So when that sort of thing starts to happen, just copy a new spot. Hit Alt and copy a new section and start to add more stripes. And as you do that, it's still going to look kind of fake. There's some more things we can do. Let me turn off a couple of layers. Okay. And I appreciate your patience, like sticking with me and everything. Let me see what we got here. Okay, so I did use the clone stamp and I put some stripes on this cat tail. Okay, now right now, if I zoom in, they don't look great. Okay, they don't look great. Like they are around an orangish color and they kind of fit on the tail, but they don't look great. The tail is very round, right? It's basically a cylinder. We can warp anything that you copy to make it look like it wraps around something. So if I'm on this layer where I made the stripes for the tail, I can go up to edit. I can come down to transform, and we've done this a few times. I can come down to transform. I'm actually going to choose one called warp. That's kind of, in my opinion, the easiest one to fit around things that are round. But if I choose warp, it's hard to see on the screen, but there's this blue grid that pops up. And what I can do is I can bend all of these little lines on the grid and I can start to curve them so that they look like they fit a little bit more around the actual tail and they look like they're a little bit more like 3D and a part of the actual body. So you can easily bend those things. And like this one, it's not perfect. But I did do one up here that I feel like looks a little bit better because I took my time on it. Okay, and it's nice and curved. Okay. I also, a lot of lionfish have spots. I'm not finished with it. But I added some spots to the white fur. If your animals have any blank spots like that, those are good areas to just add a little bit of a pattern or a design or texture from the other animal to help it feel more a little more realistic. And I just turned the opacity down and put a blending mode on it. Okay, so those are things you can do. Clone stamp tool is your friend. Remember, masking is your friend. If you decide later that a mask doesn't look right, click on that mask, go to a tool that makes running ants, and go back to select and mask, and you can edit it. Okay, you can change it. You can edit whatever you need to kind of clean it up. But just take your time and think about how you do want to blend stuff. I will come around today. I know you're not going to be like very far along today necessarily, but I may make suggestions to you if I feel like there might be something you could do that would make what your vision is a little bit quicker or that might help it look a little bit more realistic. But also, if there's something that you already know, just looking at your pictures right now is going to be difficult, let me know and I can help you think about it today while I'm here. One last thing I do want to mention. Okay, a lot of you might need to flip a picture. Say I decide I need to flip this cat. This cat needs to be facing the other way. Remember, you can click on the layer and you can go up to Edit and Transform. And down at the very bottom, there are two different types of flip. You can flip it vertical. I'm not clicked on the right layer. I'm doing an absolutely atrocious job. Where's this cat? All right, there it is. Okay. You can hit transform again, hit flip vertical, and it'll flip it upside down. Gosh, I'm struggling. All right, there we go. There's my upside down cat. All right, got it. Cool. Okay, you can also turn it the other way. So if you need it to be facing a different direction, you can hit flip horizontal, and it'll be looking a different direction. Okay? What else can I show you? Maybe shadows. Anything anybody else would like to see in particular? Okay. Let me mention a couple of things with shadows. Yeah. Okay. I'll come to you first. Hang on just a second. Let me mention a couple of things with shadows. Okay. Let me turn off some things really quick. So if I do want to add a shadow, there's a bunch of different ways you can do it. Okay. Remember, you can just double click on a layer and it'll bring up your layer style and it will have an option down at the bottom that says drop shadow. And you can change all the different effects with your drop shadow, okay, and make it look more realistic than mine does there. Okay, but there's also a much simpler way. A lot of you are going to create animals that just have a really weird shadow because maybe now the animal has horns and it didn't before. Okay, you can also cheat the system in a really, really easy way. Put a layer right above your background picture, okay, whatever it is. Grab the paintbrush, okay, and I am going to leave my paintbrush at 100% opacity. I'm going to choose black as my color, and I'm going to make sure that the hardness is turned down to 0. And I can fake my own shadow. Okay, now I know this is too dark, but I can go over the edges of my animal and I can add a shadow to it. And if your lighting is different, maybe your shadow needs to go the other way. But once I have it painted on there, I can come over to the blend modes and I could try different blending modes out. Okay, I can also just turn down the opacity. And sometimes when you have a hybrid animal, that's the easiest way to make a shadow that looks like it actually fits that animal. This isn't the only way I would do it, but for the sake of time, that is a very simple way. Okay, if you try that out and it still doesn't quite look right, I'll show you a different method that takes a little bit more time, but it's a little bit more like that superhero shadow that we did. Okay. Now, I know I have a couple people that have like individual questions related to theirs. Does anybody have any other general questions or things they want to see? General question, personal? Yeah. Okay. Okay. I'll come around to you in just a minute. So, yeah. Yeah, go for it. What is it?
Would it matter if things are like like
faded out.
Or like thin little bit.
Yeah, that's a good question. Okay, I did have somebody just ask a good question. I know I've got a couple of examples like that, so I'm going to turn that on really quick. So a lot of times when you do use the object selection tool, things will get kind of thinned out, like more than you mean for them to. Like I was going to make these fake whiskers on this cat, and it got really thin here. Sometimes they're just kind of see through. If that happens, it's okay. I would go back into your mask, and if you can, use the paintbrush to kind of clean up around those edges with black and white. I would try to, but sometimes it's unavoidable. You can also cheat the system. Like mine have a pattern on them, but a lot of instances like this, it might just be a solid color, like tan or black. And if you can just paint a couple of tiny details in with the paintbrush and it will look like it's complete, you can do it that way too. So like I could come over here and I could also even like clone stamp it. I could clone stamp this little section of the whiskers and paste some back in just so it feels a little more complete. Okay. All right. Now, the last thing I do want you to do, a lot of you have started building in Photoshop. If you have not already, pause and save it. I do not want you to have to start again. So pause and save it. You can name it whatever